Vivian Deboo is seeking to serve his sentence from his southern suburbs home, but that has sparked outrage from his victims, their supporters and politicians.
Vivian Deboo had no words as he was mobbed by those who suffered through his crimes.
The victims would like to see this person be in jail, be incarcerated.
2 hours later, Judge Simon Stretton did just that, revoking Deboo's bail. Deboo sexually abused 2 young boys who he met through church in the 1990s, but his crimes weren't uncovered until decades later. His defence lawyer has argued that he isn't a threat to the community and should be allowed to serve his sentence on detention in his Pasadena home, where he's lived with his wife for the past 7 years.
Punishment needs to fit the crime, and crimes of child abuse are heinous and they need to be punished appropriately, and that includes incarceration, being in jail. It doesn't include being a get-out-of-jail card free, going into home detention.
The case prompted Labor to introduce a bill to Parliament to ban pedophiles from serving their sentences on home detention. Debate was adjourned, but the local government MP was at today's protest.
The Attorney-General is currently working on legislation, and you can speak to her and direct any questions that you might have in terms of legislative reforms that we'll be introducing in the future.
Deboo was sentenced in 1996 for similar offending against 3 other young boys. In both cases, he pleaded guilty the day before he was due to stand trial. But despite his guilty pleas, the court has heard he's shown no remorse for his actions. The decision to remand Deboo in custody offering some closure to his victims.
The community can be protected and that nobody else has to be worried about their children or their brothers or their family.
He'll be sentenced on Tuesday. Rebecca Opie, ABC News, Adelaide.
Meanwhile, there have been tears of joy from 2 men who for 38 years have been fighting for answers as to who murdered their mother. Victoria's coroner is reopening the investigation into the 1980 murder of Maria James, stabbed to death in her Melbourne bookshop. It comes after a series of revelations about the case in the ABC's true crime podcast, Trace.
It's a day these brothers thought they'd never see.
You were terrified and you've spoken out about it.
Mark and Adam James were just 13 and 11 years old when their mother Maria was murdered in the back of the bookshop they lived in. There were lots of suspects, but the trail went cold until 2013, when Adam revealed he'd been abused by a local priest, Father Anthony Bongiorno. His mum was set to confront the priest the day she was murdered. Police ruled out Father Bongiorno in 2015, but wouldn't say why. But last year, the Trace podcast revealed a witness had seen the priest around the time of the murder, covered in blood. The coroner will be looking into Adam's abuse by 2 priests and whether Maria was murdered to ensure she stayed silent.
It's taken me a long time to come out.
Trace also revealed a forensics bungle meant police never had the killer's DNA to begin with. And since then, Maria's bloodstained quilt and certain police documents have gone missing. So last July, Mark James appealed to the coroner to get to the bottom of it.
There just seemed to be so many obstacles that were thrown up out of nowhere. And at times I didn't think this would ever happen.
He wants the coroner to ask certain questions of the Catholic Church and Victoria Police.
Look, we're 38 years on from the day that I walked into the bookshop. I think it's exciting news, especially for her 2 children, Mark and Adam.
Police worked on typewriters when he joined the force. Now podcasting offers an innovative way to tap into community grapevines.
It just shows that this is a new way in which maybe Victoria Police or other police units around Australia could look at.
None of the new facts and circumstances would actually be known.
Ms Guerrero-Diaz says in another precedent, a new law first had to be passed by Parliament to afford the coroner clear jurisdiction to reopen the decades-old case.
It's incredibly rare. It's never happened in my career.
Whatever happens from here, Mark and Adam James can be sure of one thing.
Mum would be very proud at how far we've come.
She's probably very surprised.
Rachel Brown, ABC News, Melbourne.
There have been tears and applause in a Sydney court as Daniel James Holdham was told he'll spend the rest of his days in prison. The man who killed his girlfriend before murdering her 2-year-old daughter and leaving her body in a suitcase has been handed 2 life sentences.
10 years after his horrendous crimes, Daniel James Holdom heads to prison for the rest of his life. The convicted murderer's two victims never stood a chance. First, he sexually assaulted Carly Pearce Stevenson, stomped on her, left her body in the Belangolo State Forest near Wollongong and took photographs to keep as trophies.
His treatment of her showed complete disdain for her existence as a human being. To him, she was just flesh with a life that could be extinguished for his vile pleasure.
Candice was next. Holdom kept her for 4 more days, then dumped her body in a suitcase beside a remote highway in South Australia. Police believe he sexually assaulted her too.
A completely defenceless 2-year-old who was intentionally killed with some forethought by being suffocated and stuffed in a suitcase and dumped. Adding to this the sexual assault element only makes it the more despicable.
As Holdom was handed 2 life sentences, his victims' loved ones applauded. He stole their whole lives from them and from us. His brutality will haunt us forever. Nothing done to him will bring Carly and Candice back or repay the toll on us. The homicide squad boss praised their strength and dignity, as well as the hard work of detectives.
This investigation has been conducted over about 1,100 kilometres, 4 states, involving many police from many jurisdictions.
Just as the sentencing was due to begin, Daniel Holdom made a last-minute attempt to retract his guilty plea for the murder of Candice, with his lawyer telling the court Holdom hadn't been able to properly digest the case against him while in segregation in prison.
The 44-year-old will have plenty of time to digest it now. The judge rejected the application, undeterred from his plan to hand down the highest sentence the law allows. Mazoe Ford, ABC News, Sydney.